The Thompson family had been dreaming of this day for years. After months of searching, late-night discussions, and endless paperwork, they finally found their perfect home in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It wasn't flashy or extravagant, but it had everything they wanted. A cozy living room with big windows that let sunlight pour in, a backyard where the kids could play, and even a little flower bed just waiting to bloom. For the couple and their 2 children, this house wasn't just a building, it was the start of a new chapter. When they first pulled into the driveway on moving day, the husband couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. He worked as an accountant, crunching numbers all day at the office, so having a place like this felt like proof that hard work paid off. His wife, on the other hand, wore a different kind of badge, one most people didn't know about. While she spent her days juggling school runs, grocery trips, and helping out at the local PTA, her real job was far more intense. She led one of the toughest divisions in law enforcement, leading teams to take down organized crime syndicates across the country. But here, in this sleepy little suburb, no one needed to know that. Here, she could just be the new neighbor. Their first week went smoothly enough. They unpacked boxes, hung pictures on the walls, and tried to settle into their routine. The kids loved exploring every corner of the house, while the parents enjoyed watching them adjust to their new surroundings. Everything seemed normal until she showed up. Her name was Patricia Langley, though everyone called her Corinne because, well, she fit the stereotype perfectly. Dressed in designer jeans and oversized sunglasses, she strode up to their front door holding a clipboard thicker than a phone book. Her lips curled into what might have passed as a smile if it weren't for the sharpness in her eyes. Without waiting for an invitation, she launched into her spiel. "Welcome to Willow Creek Estates," she chirped, handing over a stack of papers. "I'm the president of our homeowners association, and these are the guidelines you'll need to follow to keep our community looking pristine. You'll want to pay close attention to Section 4. It covers lawn maintenance, and don't forget about mailbox colors. We're very particular about those." The wife took the packet with a polite nod, glancing through the pages filled with rules about grass height, holiday decorations, and parking restrictions. Before she could respond, Karen added, "Oh, and I'll need your HOA dues by Friday. Cash or check works fine." The husband raised an eyebrow but kept quiet. His wife, however, wasn't fazed. With a calm tone, she explained they'd need some time to review the documents before making any commitments. Karen's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Of course," she said, though her voice carried a hint of annoyance. "Just remember, these rules exist for a reason, to protect property values. I trust you'll understand." After Karen left, the husband turned to his wife with a chuckle. "Well, that was something." She shrugged, tossing the packet onto the kitchen counter. "Don't worry about her. People like her thrive on control. If we give her an inch, she'd take a mile." Little did they know how right she was. Over the next few days, Karen made her presence known. She popped by unannounced to remind them about the HOA fees, pointed out minor infractions like a car parked half an inch over the curb and left passive-aggressive notes taped to their door. At first, the couple brushed it off, thinking it was just her way of being overly enthusiastic. But then things started escalating. One afternoon, while the kids played outside, Karen marched over again, this time complaining about their recycling bins. Apparently, they were lined up too haphazardly and needed to be arranged neatly against the garage. The husband bit back a laugh, wondering how anyone could get so worked up over trash cans. His wife, however, handled it with grace, thanking Karen for the tip and promising to fix it. But inside, she was growing tired of the games. This wasn't the first time someone had tried to push her around, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. Still, She reminded herself that this was a small-town neighborhood, not a courtroom or a crime scene. There was no need to pull rank yet datas. The days turned into weeks. Karen's behavior became increasingly aggressive. She began showing up at hours, nitpicking every little detail about their home. One evening, after yet another complaint about their Halloween decorations, which apparently violated Clause 3.7b of the HOA guidelines, the husband sighed and said, "Maybe we should just join the HOA so she'll leave us alone." His wife smirked. Joining won't stop her. People like her don't care about rules, they care about power. Her words proved prophetic when Karen crossed a line neither of them expected. On a crisp Saturday morning, 2 police officers arrived at their doorstep, accompanied by none other than Karen herself. Standing on their porch, she loudly accused the wife of violating community standards and demanded her arrest for non-compliance. Wife stepped forward, unfazed. With a flick of her wrist, she revealed her badge. "Officers," she said coolly, "perhaps we can discuss this inside." And just like that, the tables began to turn. The tension between the Thompsons and Karen only grew thicker as the days passed. At first, it seemed like the wife's calm demeanor might diffuse the situation. After all, she dealt with far worse in her line of work criminal masterminds. Dangerous operatives and high-stakes negotiations where lives hung in the balance. But Karen wasn't backing down. If anything, she seemed to take the wife's refusal to join the HOA as a personal affront, a challenge to her authority over the neighborhood. It started small. A note slipped under their door reminding them that holiday lights must not exceed 50 lumens per square foot. Then came another complaint about the kids' bikes being left on the driveway overnight, even though they were tucked neatly against the side of the house. Each time, the husband would roll his eyes and mutter something under his breath, while his wife would handle it with quiet efficiency. She'd send a polite email or leave a handwritten note apologizing for the oversight, always careful not to escalate things further. But Karen wasn't satisfied with apologies or minor adjustments. No, what she wanted was complete submission. And when she didn't get it, she decided to turn up the heat. One evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, the couple heard a sharp knock at the door. When they opened it, they found Karen standing there with her arms crossed, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. The sight was surreal, like something out of a sitcom, except no one was laughing. "Good evening," Karen said, her voice dripping with forced sweetness. "I'm afraid we've had multiple reports of violations from this property. These officers are here to address the matter." The husband blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "Violations? What are you talking about?" Karen held up her clipboard like it was Exhibit A in a courtroom drama. "Repeated failure to comply with HOA regulations, including but not limited to improper placement of outdoor furniture, excessive noise disturbances, and refusal to pay mandatory dues. This is a serious breach of community standards." The wife stepped forward before her husband could respond. Her face remained calm, almost serene, as she addressed the officers. "Excuse me, officers," she said, her tone firm yet respectful. "Could you clarify exactly what law has been broken here?" One of the officers shifted uncomfortably, clearly uneasy about being dragged into this domestic dispute. "Ma'am, we're just responding to a call. We'll need to look into the specifics." Without missing a beat, the wife reached into her pocket and pulled out her badge. The room fell silent as she flipped it open, revealing the unmistakable insignia of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. "I think it's best if we continue this conversation inside," she said, her voice steady and commanding. Karen's jaw dropped. For once, her perfectly rehearsed smile faltered, replaced by a mix of shock and disbelief. The officers exchanged glances, looking more embarrassed than authoritative now. They followed the couple inside, leaving Karen standing awkwardly. On the porch, once everyone was seated in the living room, the wife wasted no time getting to the point. She explained her role within the FBI, not in detail, of course, but enough to make it clear that she wasn't someone to be trifled with. The officers listened intently, nodding along as she pointed out the absurdity of wasting law enforcement resources on such trivial matters. You see, she continued, turning her attention back to Karen, who had reluctantly joined them inside. This isn't about protecting property values or maintaining standards. This is about control. And, frankly, I don't have time for games. Karen stammered, trying to defend herself. I was only doing my duty as president of the HOA. Someone has to enforce the rules, and someone will, the wife replied coolly. But maybe next time, instead of calling the police, you could try having an actual conversation with your neighbors. You might find it works better than threats. By the time the officers left, promising to file a report that distanced themselves from the incident, Karen looked like a deflated balloon. She muttered something about needing to check on her dog and hurried out the door, slamming it behind her. For a moment, the house felt eerily quiet. Then the husband let out a low whistle. Well, that was something else. His wife smiled faintly, leaning back against the couch. She won't stop. People like her never do. But at least, now she knows who she's dealing with. Over the next few days, whispers spread through the neighborhood. Neighbors who had previously kept their distance suddenly became curious. Some admired the wife's boldness, while others speculated whether she really was who she claimed to be. Was she bluffing, or was she truly connected to the FBI? Karen, meanwhile, retreated temporarily, licking her wounds. But it was clear she wasn't done. She began dropping hints during HOA meetings, implying that the new family was troublemakers who didn't respect the community. She rallied a few loyal followers, painting herself as the victim of unfair treatment, but the wife saw right through it. She knew Karen's type all too well, someone who thrived on drama and conflict, using fear and intimidation to maintain power. And she also knew that ignoring the problem wouldn't make it go away. So, she decided to take matters into her own hands. Using her connections, she quietly arranged for an undercover investigation into the HOA's activities. Agents posing as prospective homeowners infiltrated meetings, gathering evidence of discriminatory practices, financial mismanagement, and outright bullying. It turned out Karen's reign of terror extended far beyond the Thompsons. Several families had been coerced into selling their homes or driven out of the neighborhood entirely. While the operation unfolded behind the scenes, the wife kept up appearances. She attended HOA meetings, played along with Karen's antics, and subtly fed misinformation to throw her off balance. At one particularly contentious gathering, she suggested installing surveillance cameras throughout the community to deter vandalism, a proposal Karen vehemently opposed, citing privacy concerns. Unbeknownst to her, the suggestion planted seeds of doubt among other members about Karen's true motives. As the pieces fell into place, the wife couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. This wasn't just about standing up to a bully. It was about exposing the truth and giving a voice to those who had been silenced for too long. And when the time came to reveal everything, she knew it would hit Karen where it hurt the most her pride. But for now, she bided her time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Because sometimes, justice doesn't come with flashing lights or dramatic showdowns. Sometimes it arrives quietly, methodically, and with absolute precision. The tension in the neighborhood was palpable. Word had spread quickly about the infamous showdown between the wife and Karen, thanks to a few curious neighbors who'd seen the police officers leaving the Thompsons' house that evening. Speculation ran wild. Some whispered that the wife might actually be an FBI agent, while others dismissed it as an elaborate bluff meant to scare Karen off. Either way, everyone agreed on one thing. This little suburban drama had taken a turn no one saw. Karen, for her part, wasn't ready to back down. If anything, she seemed more determined than ever to prove herself right. She started showing up at random times, clipboard in hand, pointing out every minor infraction she could find. One day, it was the placement of potted plants on the porch. Another time, it was the color of the welcome mat. Each visit felt like a calculated move of power play designed to wear down the Thompsons' patience, but the wife didn't bite. Instead, she played along, nodding politely whenever Karen stopped by and promising to address whatever issue she raised. Inside, though, she was planning her next steps. She knew Karen wouldn't stop until she got what she wanted, total control over the neighborhood. And the wife also knew that simply standing her ground wouldn't be enough. It was time to turn the tables and make sure Karen understood exactly who she was dealing with. Using her connections within law enforcement, the wife quietly orchestrated a sting operation disguised as a routine audit of local HOAs. Undercover agents began attending meetings, posing as new residents eager to learn about community rules. They blended seamlessly into the crowd, taking notes and gathering evidence of discriminatory practices, financial mismanagement, and outright bullying. What they uncovered shocked even the wife. It turned out Karen's reign of terror wasn't limited to nitpicking about grass height or mailbox colors. Several families had been forced to sell their homes after receiving exorbitant fines for minor infractions. Others were denied permission to make necessary repairs because their requests didn't align with community aesthetics. Worst of all, some members of the HOA board had been siphoning funds into personal accounts, using dues meant for neighborhood improvements to line their own pockets. Armed with this information, the wife decided it was time to strike, but instead of confronting Karen directly, she chose a subtler approach. She began attending HOA meetings regularly, always sitting near the front with a calm, composed demeanor. At first, Karen seemed suspicious, watching her every move. But soon, the wife's presence became routine, just another face in the crowd. During one particularly heated meeting, Karen proposed raising HOA fees to cover the cost of installing decorative lampposts along the main road. The idea sparked debate among members, with some arguing that the current lighting was perfectly fine. That's when the wife spoke up. "I understand the desire to improve curb appeal," she said, her voice steady and measured. "But before we commit to such a large expense, shouldn't we ensure our existing systems are running efficiently? For example, have we considered installing surveillance cameras throughout the community? Not only would it enhance security, but it could also help deter vandalism." Karen's eyes narrowed immediately. "Surveillance cameras?" she snapped. "Absolutely not. Privacy is a fundamental right, and I won't stand for anything that compromises it." The wife smiled faintly, letting the comment hang in the air. Around the table, other members exchanged uneasy glances. Why was Karen so opposed to something that could benefit the entire neighborhood? The seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next few weeks, the wife continued her subtle campaign. She suggested initiatives aimed at increasing transparency, like publishing detailed reports of HOA spending or holding open forums where residents could voice concerns. Each proposal was met with resistance from Karen, who accused her of trying to undermine the HOA's authority. Behind the scenes, the undercover agents were hard at work, documenting everything. They collected signed statements from former residents who had been driven out by Karen's tactics. They gathered bank records showing how HOA funds had been misused. And they filmed covert footage of Karen berating neighbors during impromptu inspections, her tone sharp and condescending. As the evidence mounted, the wife knew it was only a matter of time before Karen's empire crumbled. But she also realized that exposing the truth wasn't just about taking down one person, it was about empowering the community to reclaim its voice. So, she took one final step. She organized a secret meeting with a small group of trusted neighbors who had grown tired of Karen's antics. "We can't keep living like this," she told them, her tone earnest but firm. "Karen has been using fear and intimidation to control us for too long. But together, we can change that. We have proof of wrongdoing, and we have the power to demand accountability." The neighbors listened intently, their expressions shifting from skepticism to determination. For years, they'd felt powerless against Karen's iron grip. Now, for the first time, they saw a path forward, one that promised justice and unity. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, the atmosphere was electric. Karen strutted in late, as usual, tossing her designer bag onto the conference table with an exaggerated sigh. "All right, let's get started," she announced, clearly expecting another rubber stamp session, where she called the shots. What she didn't expect was the folder sitting in front of each seat. Printed on the cover were 3 simple words: HOA Accountability Report. Karen froze, her smile faltering as she flipped through the pages. Her face turned pale as she realized the extent of the investigation, the financial discrepancies, the testimonies from disgruntled neighbors, the video footage capturing her behavior. Across the table, the wife watched silently, her expression unreadable. This is outrageous," Karen sputtered, slamming the folder shut. "Where did this come from? Who authorized this?" "That would be me," the wife replied coolly, standing up to address the room. "And it's not just my work. It's the result of months of research and collaboration with concerned residents. The truth is, your leadership has done more harm than good. It's time for a change." For a moment, there was silence. Then, one by one, the other members began speaking up. A young father recounted how Karen had fined him unfairly for hosting a birthday party in his backyard. An elderly woman shared how she'd been denied permission to install a wheelchair ramp because it disrupted the aesthetic. Even some of Karen's closest allies admitted they'd grown uncomfortable with her methods. Karen tried to defend herself, but her arguments fell flat. Her usual bravado dissolved into stammers and excuses as the weight of the evidence pressed down on her. By the end of the meeting, the decision was unanimous. The current HOA board would be dissolved pending further review, and a new leadership structure would be established, one focused on fairness, inclusivity, and transparency. As Karen stormed out of the room, muttering under her breath, the wife allowed herself a small smile. Justice had been served, not through force or aggression, but through patience, strategy, and teamwork. And for the first time since moving in, the Thompsons and their neighbors could finally breathe easy. But the story wasn't over yet. The fallout from the explosive HOA meeting rippled through the neighborhood like a storm. Word spread faster than anyone expected. Neighbors who had once kept their heads down, too intimidated to speak up, suddenly found their voices. People started sharing stories that kept bottled up for years, swapping tales of fines, threats, and unfair treatment at Karen's hands. It was as if a dam had burst, releasing a flood of pent-up frustration and anger. Karen, on the other hand, seemed to vanish overnight. Her perfectly manicured lawn went untrimmed, her designer sunglasses disappeared from view, and her usual morning walks around the block came to an abrupt halt. Rumors swirled about where she'd gone. Some said she'd packed up and moved to a gated community, unable to face the humiliation of being exposed in front of everyone. Others claimed she was holed up inside her house, plotting revenge. One really knew for sure, and frankly, most people didn't care. The neighborhood felt lighter without her looming presence, but just because Karen was gone didn't mean things were perfect. The HOA still existed, after all, and dismantling its toxic leadership structure was only the first step. The real challenge lay ahead: rebuilding trust among the residents and creating a system that actually worked for everyone, not just a select few. That's where the wife stepped in again. She wasn't interested in taking over the HOA or becoming some kind of neighborhood dictator. Instead, she focused on fostering collaboration. She reached out to neighbors individually, asking for input on how the HOA could better serve the community. Should they prioritize playground upgrades, more streetlights, a community garden? The responses varied, but one thing became clear. People wanted transparency and fairness above all else. With that feedback in mind, the wife helped draft a new set of guidelines, one that emphasized inclusivity rather than control. For example, instead of rigid rules about paint colors or mailbox designs, the new policy encouraged creativity while setting basic standards for safety and upkeep. Fines were replaced with warnings and opportunities to correct issues before penalties kicked in. And perhaps most importantly, monthly meetings were open to all residents, not just board members, giving everyone a chance to have their say. At first, some people were skeptical. After years of living under Karen's iron grip, it was hard to imagine a world where the HOA wasn't something to dread. But slowly, attitudes began to shift. At the first open meeting, attendance skyrocketed. Residents showed up armed with ideas, everything from organizing block parties to starting the Neighborhood Watch program. For the first time, the HOA felt less like a dictatorship and more like a team effort. Of course, not everything went smoothly. Old habits die hard, and there were moments when tensions flared. One particularly heated discussion erupted over whether to allow backyard chickens. Some neighbors argued they were noisy and unsanitary. Others insisted they were a sustainable way to reduce food waste. The debate dragged on for nearly an hour, with tempers rising on both sides. That's when the wife stepped in, calmly reminding everyone why they were there. "We're not here to win arguments," she said, her voice steady but warm. "We're here to build a community we can all be proud of. So let's focus on finding solutions that work for everyone, not just ourselves." Her words struck a chord. By the end of the meeting, a compromise had been reached. Backyard chickens would be allowed, but only if certain conditions were met, like proper fencing and noise restrictions. More importantly, the discussion left people feeling heard. A small victory, but a meaningful one. As the weeks turned into months, the transformation in the neighborhood became undeniable. Lawns that had once been indistinguishable from one another now sported quirky decorations, a painted gnome here, a wind chime there. Kids played freely in the streets, knowing their parents weren't afraid of getting fined for letting them ride bikes after dark. Even the annual Holiday Lights contest took on a new energy, with families competing not just to win, but to bring joy to the entire block. And then there was the wife herself. Though she never sought recognition, her role in turning things around didn't go unnoticed. Neighbors often stopped her at the grocery store or during evening walks to thank her, not just for standing up to Karen, but for showing them what was possible when people worked together. She always brushed off the praise with a modest smile, saying things like, "I didn't do anything special. We all did this together." Still, there were moments when her true nature peeked through. Like the time a suspicious package showed up outside someone's door, sparking fears of vandalism. While most neighbors panicked, the wife calmly assessed the situation, calling in contacts to ensure it was safe. Or the time a local teenager got into trouble with the law, and she quietly arranged for mentorship programs to help him turn his life around. These little acts of quiet heroism earned her even more respect, but also reinforced the idea that she was exactly where she belonged, in a place where she could make a difference, one neighbor at a time. Meanwhile, Karen remained conspicuously absent. Occasionally, rumors surfaced about her attempts to stir up trouble elsewhere, writing letters to city officials, filing frivolous complaints against former neighbors, but none of it gained traction. Without her loyal followers to back her up, she was just another disgruntled homeowner with nothing better to do. Eventually, the gossip died down altogether. Life returned to normal, or at least a new version of normal. Block parties replaced passive-aggressive notes. Shared meals replaced whispered accusations. And for the first time in years, the neighborhood truly felt like a community. For the husband, watching these changes unfold was nothing short of miraculous. He remembered those early days when every knock on the door filled him with dread, wondering what ridiculous rule Karen would try to enforce next. Now, he looked forward to weekends spent chatting with neighbors over coffee or cheering on kids during impromptu soccer games in the cul-de-sac. One evening, as he sat on the porch watching the sunset, he turned to his wife and said, "You know, I used to think moving here was a mistake, but now I wouldn't trade this place for anything." She smiled, leaning back in her chair. "Funny how things work out, isn't it?" He nodded, glancing toward the horizon. "Yeah, funny and kind of amazing." The transformation of Willow Creek Estates wasn't something that happened overnight. It was gradual, like the first signs of spring after a long winter, slow but undeniable. The neighborhood had shed its old skin, shedding years of fear and anger, frustration under Karen's rule, and now it was stepping into a brighter, more hopeful version of itself. But even as things improved, there were still moments when the past crept back in, reminding everyone how fragile progress could be. One such moment came on a crisp autumn morning. About 6 months after Karen's dramatic exit, a new family moved into her old house, a young couple with 2 toddlers and a golden retriever who seemed determined to sniff every blade of grass in sight. They were friendly enough, waving hello to neighbors and baking cookies for their first block party. But within days, whispers began circulating. Some residents noticed the husband parking his work van on the street instead of the driveway, a minor infraction according to the updated HOA guidelines. Others pointed out that their Halloween decorations included an inflatable skeleton hanging from a tree, which technically violated the no obstructions clause. At first, the wife dismissed these murmurs as harmless gossip. After all, people were bound to notice changes in the neighborhood dynamics. But when she overheard one neighbor muttering, "I hope they don't turn out like her," her stomach tightened. She knew exactly who "her" referred to, and she realized that while Karen might be gone, her legacy of pettiness lingered. That evening, as the kids played board games on the living room floor, the wife sat down with her husband to talk. "We can't let this slide," she said firmly. "If we don't address it now, those old habits will come back, and everything we've worked for will start unraveling." Her husband nodded, understanding immediately. "So what do we do?" She smiled faintly, already formulating a plan. "We remind them what really matters." The next day, the wife invited the new family over for coffee. At first, they seemed nervous, likely expecting criticism or complaints. Instead, she greeted them warmly, offering homemade muffins and asking questions about their move. Within minutes, the tension melted away, replaced by laughter as their toddler chased the dog around the backyard. When the conversation turned to the HOA, the wife kept her tone light but direct. "Listen, I know adjusting to a new neighborhood can feel overwhelming. There are rules, sure, but honestly, most of us just care about being good neighbors. If you ever have questions or if anyone gives you trouble, just let me know, okay?" The couple looked relieved, thanking her profusely before heading home. Later that week, they attended their first HOA meeting where the wife publicly welcomed them and encouraged other members to reach out if they needed help settling in. Her message was clear: mistakes happen, and kindness goes further than judgment. It worked. Slowly but surely, the initial skepticism toward the new family faded. Kids started playing together. Parents exchanged tips on local schools, and soon, the inflatable skeleton became a beloved feature of the neighborhood's Halloween display. Even the husband's work van blended seamlessly into the streetscape, no longer drawing sideways glances. But the wife didn't stop there. She recognized that rebuilding trust required constant effort, not just grand gestures but small, everyday actions that reinforced the idea of community. So, she organized regular potlucks, holiday parades, and volunteer days at the nearby park. She encouraged neighbors to share skills and resources, whether it was borrowing tools or teaching each other how to garden. Over time, these efforts created a sense of belonging that went beyond shared walls and fences. It rooted itself in genuine connection. Of course, challenges still arose. Not everyone agreed on every decision, and disagreements occasionally flared up during meetings. But here's the thing: conflict wasn't avoided, it was embraced. Neighbors learned to listen to each other, compromise, and find solutions that worked for the majority. Disagreements became opportunities to grow rather than reasons to divide. For example, when a proposal to install speed bumps sparked heated debate, the wife suggested hosting a trial period. Residents could test the bumps for a month and provide feedback before making a final decision. This approach not only resolved the issue, but also strengthened the community's problem-solving skills. People left the meeting feeling heard and valued, even if they hadn't gotten their way. As the months passed, the neighborhood continued to evolve. New traditions emerged, like the annual chili cook-off and the summer movie night in the park. Longtime residents who had once kept to themselves became active participants, contributing ideas and energy to projects big and small. Even the teens, who had previously spent most evenings glued to their phones, found ways to get involved, organizing cleanup drives and mentoring younger kids. And then there was the wife herself. Though she never sought the spotlight, her presence remained a steady force in the community. Whether it was mediating disputes, brainstorming creative solutions, or simply lending an ear to someone struggling, she embodied the kind of leadership that inspired others to step up. Her quiet confidence reminded everyone that strength doesn't always shout, it often listens, supports, and empowers. Still, she made sure to keep parts of her life private. While rumors about her background occasionally resurfaced, usually spurred by curious newcomers, she never confirmed or denied anything. To her neighbors, she was simply the woman who helped turn things around. And maybe that was enough. One chilly December evening, as snowflakes began drifting lazily from the sky, the neighborhood gathered for its annual tree lighting ceremony. Strings of twinkling lights adorned porches and lampposts, casting a warm glow across the streets. Children darted through the crowd, clutching cups of hot cocoa, while adults exchanged hugs and laughter. Standing near the center of it all, the wife watched as the massive evergreen lit up, eliciting cheers from the crowd. Her husband nudged her gently, nodding toward the scene. "You did this," he said softly. "All of it." She shook her head, smiling. "No, we did it. Together." He chuckled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Whatever you say. But admit it, you're pretty amazing." For once, she didn't argue. Instead, she leaned into him, taking in the sights and sounds of the celebration. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly at peace, not because she'd solved some global crisis or taken down a criminal mastermind, but because she'd helped create something real, something lasting. A place where people cared for each other, flaws and all. Later that night, as the festivities wound down and families headed home, the wife took one last stroll through the neighborhood. The snow had begun to stick, blanketing the sidewalks and rooftops in a soft, silvery layer. As she walked, she noticed something pinned to a bulletin board outside the community center, a handwritten note addressed to our neighborhood hero. Read, asterisk, "Thank you for showing us what it means to stand strong without losing your heart. Because of you, this isn't just a neighborhood, it's a home." Asterisk. She stood there for a moment, reading the words over and over until they blurred slightly in the dim light. Then, with a small smile, she tucked the note into her coat pocket and continued walking, leaving fresh footprints behind her. Behind closed doors, somewhere far away, Karen scrolled through social media, seething as pictures of the tree lighting flooded her feed. She muttered under her breath about those people ruining her perfect vision of order, but no one listened anymore. Her voice had grown faint, drowned out by the laughter and warmth of a community that had finally found its footing. And so, life went on in Willow Creek Estates, not perfect, not without its quirks, but undeniably better than before. Because sometimes standing up to a bully isn't just about winning. Sometimes it's about proving that kindness, courage, and unity can light the darkest corners and make even the smallest places shine.